There are moments in history where the past doesn't just whisper, it screams. Archaeologists dig expecting pottery, bones, tools, pieces that fit neatly into what we already believe. But sometimes they uncover something else, something that doesn't fit, something so advanced, so impossible, that it shouldn't exist in the timeline we know. Objects made with precision thousands of years before the invention of the wheel. Structures carved with techniques modern engineers still cannot replicate. Artifacts that suggest ancient cultures possessed knowledge we're only rediscovering today. Every time one of these discoveries surfaces, it forces a terrifying question. What if the history we were taught is only half the story? Welcome to CurioBox. If you're new here, we uncover the true mysteries of our world. The ones history books avoid, the ones science still argues about, and the ones that challenge everything we think we know. Before we go any deeper, let me know in the comments where in the world you're watching from, because what you're about to hear spans continents, civilizations, and timelines that simply shouldn't intersect. And make sure to like and subscribe. It helps us reach more curious minds like yours. Tonight, we're not exploring legends. We're investigating 15 real ancient discoveries, physical objects, that break logic, defy archaeology, and hint at a forgotten chapter of human history. Some of these artifacts shouldn't exist for another 3,000 years. Others appear to come from cultures that vanished overnight. And a few suggest the impossible, that someone or something may have visited our world long before recorded time. And the deeper we go, the stranger it gets. Because every discovery in this list leads to the same unsettling conclusion. Human history isn't incomplete. It's been erased. Now, let's begin. In 1952, deep inside a dusty cave near Qumran by the Dead Sea, a team of archaeologists stumbled upon something no one was prepared for. Among the fragile parchments and brittle manuscripts that would later be called the Dead Sea Scrolls, one object immediately stood out. It wasn't soft, delicate, or written with ink. It was metal, a tightly rolled sheet of pure copper, darkened by age, sealed so tightly it took years before anyone could unroll it without breaking it into pieces. When experts finally managed to open it, they expected a religious text, a historical record, maybe even a prayer. What they found instead froze them in place. It was a treasure map. Not symbolic, not poetic, not mythological, but a literal detailed list of over 60 hiding places, each supposedly containing enormous quantities of gold, silver, ritual artifacts, and sacred items. The text described exact locations, specific measurements, and precise inventories. In the cistern beneath the eastern colonnade, under the steps at the entrance of the cave, 40 cubits deep beneath the courtyard. The numbers were staggering. Some entries listed hundreds of talents of gold, more than entire ancient kingdoms ever possessed. But the strangest part was the material. Every other Dead Sea Scroll was written on parchment or papyrus. This was the only one carved onto metal. Whoever made it didn't want it to decay, burn, rot, or disappear. They wanted this message to survive at any cost, as if they were writing to someone far in the future, someone they expected would need this information long after their own world was gone. The mystery deepens when you ask the most basic question: who writes a treasure map on copper? The style of writing doesn't match the priests of the Second Temple. It doesn't match the sect at Qumran who wrote the other scrolls. It seems to come from an entirely different group, a group whose identity remains unknown. Some scholars believe the treasure belonged to the temple in Jerusalem, hidden before the Roman invasion in 70 CE. But if that were true, why would the writing style be different? Why would none of the described locations match known temple storerooms or ritual sites? Others think the treasure comes from a secret group whose wealth and rituals were lost to time. A society that deliberately hid its riches where only its members could find them. Then there's an even stranger theory, that the copper scroll isn't describing physical treasure at all. Some researchers think the gold and silver might be coded references to knowledge, sacred teachings, or forbidden information. The numbers could be symbolic. The locations could be metaphors. In this interpretation, the copper scroll becomes something far more mysterious. A cryptic guide meant only for the initiated, disguised as a list of buried wealth. But the biggest mystery is the simplest one. If the instructions are so exact, why hasn't anyone found anything? For more than 70 years, archaeologists, governments, and private explorers have searched the listed sites using advanced mapping, seismic scans, and excavations. Not a single treasure has ever been recovered. Either the treasure was removed long ago, or the clues no longer point to where they once did. Earthquakes, erosion, collapsed caves, shifting landscapes, thousands of years can erase the very ground beneath you. Some believe the treasure is still out there, but locked away in structures that no longer exist. Sealed chambers, forgotten tunnels, underground vaults destroyed by time. Others take a darker view. The treasure might have been meant for one specific group, a group long gone, and without their key to decoding the instructions, no one else will ever understand what the map truly describes. Maybe the creators hid wealth beyond imagination. Maybe they hid knowledge they believed was too dangerous to fall into the wrong hands. Or maybe the real treasure was never meant to be found at all, only to be remembered. The Copper Scroll remains one of history's most unsettling discoveries. A message carved in metal, written with an urgency no one can fully explain. It lists riches that no one can locate, in places that may no longer exist, created by people we still cannot identify. And it leaves behind a single question that continues to echo through time. Why would someone carve a treasure map into copper, unless they believed someone in the distant future would desperately need to find what they left behind? In 1936, just outside Baghdad, a team of workers excavating an ancient village stumbled upon a small clay jar buried in the earth. At first glance, it looked ordinary, the kind of pot you'd expect to hold oil, grain, or maybe a handful of coins. But inside the jar was something nobody expected. A copper cylinder rolled perfectly and sealed with asphalt. And inside that cylinder, a slender iron rod, corroded with age but unmistakably deliberate in its construction. At the bottom of the jar, faint traces of an acidic substance, possibly wine vinegar or lemon juice, clung to the walls. To most people, it was just a strange container. But to Wilhelm König, the director of Iraq's National Museum, it looked like something impossible. He realized the clay jar, copper tube, iron rod, and acidic liquid formed a primitive electrochemical cell. In simple terms, a battery. If filled with the right solution, the jar could produce electricity. Not a lot, just a few volts, but enough to shock you. Enough to electroplate gold. Enough to power something small. But here's the problem. This artifact wasn't from the 1800s, or even the Middle Ages. It belonged to the Parthian Empire, an ancient civilization more than 2,000 years old, existing long before the world officially discovered electricity. The moment König suggested the jar might be a battery, the academic world went into confusion. Because if he was right, it meant ancient people had knowledge that wasn't supposed to exist yet. Knowledge history claims wasn't discovered until the 18th century. Why would ancient craftsmen need electricity? That question has baffled experts for decades. Some believe the device was used for electroplating, coating objects in thin layers of gold. If true, the Baghdad Battery could explain how some ancient artifacts achieved extremely fine, uniform gold layers without visible hammer marks or leafing. But no workshop has ever been found that definitively proves this. Others suggested it was used for medical therapy, like an ancient version of electroacupuncture. After all, many ancient societies believed electrical fish possessed healing properties. Maybe the Parthians found a way to recreate that effect artificially. Then there are the more mysterious theories, the kind that thrive because of how little we truly know. Some researchers believe the battery was part of a much larger mechanism, something that no longer survives. A forgotten device that required a tiny electrical current, its purpose lost to time. Others even argue it was used in ritual practices, that priests used the electric sting to create illusions of divine power, shocking objects or making metal idols come alive in front of believers. One thing is certain, the Baghdad Battery wasn't an accident. It wasn't random pieces thrown together. Every component was designed to fit perfectly. The copper tube rolled to precise dimensions, the iron rod positioned to avoid touching the sides, the asphalt sealant preventing leaks. Whoever built it understood the principles well enough to replicate them. But the mystery grows deeper with what came next. Once the jars were discovered, museums and researchers began testing replicas. Each one produced the same result, a steady flow of electricity just as König suspected. And yet, despite this experimental proof, there is still no universally accepted explanation. No text, no drawing, no ancient manual tells us how the jars were used. The people who made them left no instructions at all. Some believe this silence is intentional, that the knowledge was secret, preserved only by elite craftsmen or priestly groups. Others think the jars were merely part of a scientific curiosity that never advanced further. But one of the most unsettling possibilities is that the jars weren't isolated objects. They might have been pieces of a larger technology, a technology that vanished completely. Today, the original Baghdad Battery is locked behind glass, unable to answer the questions surrounding it. The ancient world remains silent, and the minds who created it have been gone for more than 2 millennia. Yet the jar sits there, stubborn and undeniable, challenging everything we think we know about the past. Because if this small device truly is a battery, then history is incomplete. The timeline of human invention is wrong, and the people of the ancient world were experimenting with forces we assumed they didn't understand for thousands of years. The Baghdad Battery stands as a quiet reminder that the past is full of surprises, and every discovery, no matter how small, has the power to rewrite everything. In 1898, deep inside the tomb of Padiamen at Saqqara, Egypt, archaeologists uncovered an object that didn't make sense. Amid pottery shards, funerary masks, and fragments of wooden coffins lay a small carved figure, just 6 inches long, shaped from lightweight sycamore wood. At first, it looked like a simple bird. Egyptians loved animals, after all. Their tombs are full of figurines meant to accompany the dead, but this wasn't like any bird archaeologists had cataloged before. The wings were straight, not curved like typical avian carvings. The tail wasn't shaped like feathers, it was vertical, like the rear rudder of an airplane. And beneath the body was a flat, smooth surface, almost like a fuselage. For years, the artifact was stored away as a wooden bird, a harmless curiosity. But when experts revisited the collection decades later, the strange object caught their attention all over again. The Saqqara Bird, as it came to be known, didn't look like a bird anymore, it looked aerodynamic. Some researchers began to wonder, could this be evidence that ancient Egyptians had experimented with flight? Not powered flight, nothing so dramatic as engines or metal wings, but the principles of gliding, balance, and lift. Principles that wouldn't be formally studied until the 1800s. When aviation engineers examined the object, things only got stranger. They noted that the wings had a slight airfoil curve. The tail, although vertical, was shaped like something that could stabilize a craft. And the object's weight distribution was almost perfectly balanced. Curiosity turned into experimentation. Engineers created replicas from balsa wood, matching the Saqqara Bird's dimensions exactly. They adjusted nothing. Same weight, same angles, same shape. One test launched the replica into the air like a toy glider. Instead of tumbling or spiraling, the model glided forward smoothly, covering a surprising distance. Some replicas even soared gracefully when given slight modifications, such as a horizontal stabilizer, but the original, as found, still managed to fly. Clumsy, imperfect, but undeniably airborne. This triggered a debate that has lasted for years. Was the Saqqara Bird just a child's toy? A symbolic offering to the gods? Or the remnant of ancient aerodynamic experimentation, lost to time? Egyptologists proposed the traditional view. The figurine was likely a symbolic depiction of the Ba, the spiritual essence of a person, often shown as a bird. In this interpretation, the shape didn't matter. It was art, not engineering. But aviation experts disagreed. They argued that the design choices were too specific, too practical to be accidental. A vertical tail on a bird carving is extremely rare in Egyptian art. In fact, no other known bird figurine from that era features one, and the flat underside, which made the object glide, served no symbolic purpose at all. Unless someone understood how air moves around a surface. Then came another mystery. On the body of the Saqqara Bird, an inscription was found, Gift of Amun. Scholars believe it may have been placed in the tomb as a kind of wish, freedom, movement, or the ability of the deceased to fly into the afterlife. But others wonder if it hints at something deeper, the possibility that the object represented knowledge considered sacred. Some fringe theorists suggested it was part of a larger model, maybe a ceremonial glider, maybe a prototype of something bigger. A few even proposed that ancient Egyptians studied the flight of birds and attempted to replicate it with wood and cloth, experimenting with gliders long before modern science existed. One of the most interesting theories came from Dr. Khalil Messiha, the researcher who rediscovered the artifact in the 1960s. He believed the Saqqara Bird might have been one piece of a set, a collection of aerodynamic models now lost. To him, it wasn't symbolic. It was practical, a test model, evidence of forgotten experimentation. But the truth is, no documents from ancient Egypt describe flight experiments. No workshop has been uncovered containing tools or plans. No written record explains the object's purpose. We have only this single artifact, a silent wooden model buried more than 2,000 years ago. Yet the Saqqara Bird continues to defy explanations. It refuses to fit neatly into any category. It is too aerodynamic to be random, too unique to be dismissed, too unexplained to be forgotten. And so it remains, perched behind glass in Cairo's Museum of Egyptian Antiquities, a small piece of wood capable of gliding into the air, carrying with it the weight of a possibility that challenges history. Maybe the ancient world understood more than we give it credit for. Maybe knowledge was discovered, lost, rediscovered, and forgotten again. Not once, but many times throughout human civilization. Whatever its true purpose was, one thing is certain. It was never meant to sit quietly. It was meant to fly. Among the deserts of ancient Mesopotamia lies a clay tablet that shouldn't exist, a relic so strange, so impossible, that even the most respected historians struggle to explain it. It's called the Sumerian King List, and at first glance it looks like nothing more than a historical record. A list of rulers, cities, and dynasties. But read deeper and you'll realize you're looking at something far more disturbing. Something that suggests human history is not just incomplete, but fundamentally misunderstood. The tablet describes every king who ruled Sumer, their names, their cities, the years they held the throne. But here's where reality cracks. The earliest kings are said to have ruled for thousands of years. Not hundreds, thousands, died 8 kings ruling for a combined total of 241 and 200 years. These weren't gods or mythological beings placed in some religious text. They were written down as historical leaders, described with the same matter-of-fact tone as the kings who lived much later, whose reigns lasted only decades. Imagine finding a modern history book claiming Britain once had a king who ruled for 30,000 years, written as casually as Queen Elizabeth II reigned for 70. That's the kind of contradiction the Sumerian king list presents. Some scholars claim the early numbers are symbolic, metaphors of power or myth. But if that were true, why did later portions of the list suddenly become extremely realistic? Why did the scribes switch from impossibly long lifespans to the exact, normal human lifespans of rulers we can actually verify through archaeology? Same handwriting style, same format, same tone, but completely different rules for time. It's as if someone had taken 2 versions of history, one mythic, one real, and fused them together. Except no one can explain why. And then there's the greatest mystery of all. The list says that before the Great Flood, the same type of global flood described in cultures all over the world, kings lived incredibly long lives. But after the flood, their reigns became shorter and shorter until they matched our modern expectations. It's as if some cataclysm reset the human condition itself. Now here's what makes the story even stranger. Parts of the king list match archaeological records perfectly. Cities we once believed were mythical were discovered exactly where the tablet said they'd be. Dynasties we doubted turned out to be real. Excavations revealed ruins, artifacts, royal graves, all aligning with the later entries on the list. So how could a document be both myth and fact at the same time? Some researchers argue that the Sumerians preserved a memory of a forgotten civilization. A civilization that existed long before anything we currently acknowledge in human history. A world where lifespans were different, where rulers held power for reasons lost to time, where events recorded on clay weren't meant to be symbolic but literal. Others think the list captures the moment humanity transitioned from something we don't understand into something we do. A shift from pre-flood humanity to post-flood humanity, whatever those 2 conditions really were. There's even a more controversial theory. What if the earliest names aren't human at all? What if they record beings the Sumerians believed were real? Figures they called the Anunnaki, who came from the heavens, taught mankind, and ruled before humans took over. Of course, mainstream historians reject this idea, but the tablet doesn't. It doesn't differentiate. It doesn't separate gods from men, it simply lists rulers, and it claims they lived impossibly long lives. So what exactly is the Sumerian king list? A distorted memory of ancient events? A blend of mythology and fact, or the last surviving record of a forgotten age, one wiped out by disaster, reset by cataclysm, and buried under thousands of years of shifting sand? The truth is no one knows, but the more archaeologists uncover, the more this clay tablet refuses to be dismissed as a simple legend. It challenges the boundaries of history, demands explanation, and confronts us with an uncomfortable possibility: that the story of humanity may be much older, much stranger, and far more complicated than we've ever been taught. Deep in the hills of Zhejiang, China, there exists a place that defies logic. A place carved with such precision, such scale, and such mystery that even the most advanced modern engineers admit they still cannot explain it. It's called the Longyou Caves, and the moment you understand what they truly are, you realize you're looking at one of the greatest unsolved feats of ancient engineering ever discovered. The story begins in 1992, when a group of villagers draining a pond noticed something strange. The water kept disappearing faster than expected. Curious, they kept pumping, revealing not mud or rock beneath, but the entrance to a massive man-made cavern. Soon, more were found. Not one cave, not two, but 24 enormous underground chambers, each carved entirely by hand, with perfect symmetry, smooth walls, and a design that shouldn't be possible for the time period they supposedly came from. These aren't small rooms. Each cave is the size of a cathedral, soaring up to 30 meters high with stone columns supporting their interiors like the architecture of some forgotten kingdom. Their walls are marked with a mysterious parallel line pattern, uniform, consistent, carved into every surface, as if the builders wanted to leave behind a signature. No tool marks, no debris, no signs of habitation, no traces of soot from torches, just silent, perfectly carved stone. But here's where the mystery deepens. There are no historical records of these caves being built. Not a single ancient text mentions them. And this is China, one of the world's most historically detailed civilizations with documentation stretching thousands of years. They recorded everything: battles, crops, taxes, even the number of steps in imperial staircases. But carving out 24 massive subterranean halls, complete silence. Archaeologists estimate that removing the amount of stone required to create just one of these caves would take over 1,000 workers working non-stop for years. Multiply that by 24 caves, each as meticulously carved as the last. That's millions of cubic feet of rock removed, yet not a single piece of it has ever been found. No piles of rubble, no abandoned quarries, no transport paths, it simply vanished. Then there's the precision. The symmetry between caves suggests they were carved at the same time, following a shared blueprint. The angles are consistently perfect, the walls are straight. The ceilings form smooth arcs that maintain their shape across long distances. Experts have tried to recreate the pattern on the walls using ancient tools and failed. Creating that uniform texture across such a massive area would require mechanical consistency that should not have existed in ancient times. So what were the Longyou Caves for? Some say they were ancient temples, except there are no altars, no artifacts, no markings of worship. Others propose storage chambers. Yet their decorative, labor-intensive design makes no sense for simple storage. Some believe they were burial chambers, but not a single human bone has ever been found inside. Every theory collapses under evidence. There's also the question of how the caves have stayed intact. The stone they're carved from is soft, vulnerable to erosion, and yet the caves have stood for over 2,000 years without collapsing. Their ceilings still hold perfectly, their walls remain dry and clean. No mold, no water damage, no structural failures. Even with modern engineering, building underground spaces this large requires advanced stress calculations. Whoever built these caves understood structural integrity, far beyond what ancient records suggest. And maybe the strangest detail of all, the parallel line carvings on the walls match patterns found in artifacts thousands of miles away and thousands of years apart. From pottery to tools, as if this design was a shared symbol between civilizations we never thought were connected. So we're left with a mystery that refuses to shrink. How did an ancient society with no advanced machinery carve out a massive underground complex with mathematical precision? Why did they create something so enormous and then leave no record of it? What happened to the millions of tons of stone? And why did these caves feel less like a construction project and more like a message carved in silence? The Longyou Caves stand untouched, unclaimed, unexplained. A reminder that our ancestors may have possessed knowledge, techniques, or tools that have been lost to time. They challenge our timeline of human capability, hint at forgotten civilizations, and whisper a truth many are afraid to consider: that we may not be the first advanced society to walk this earth, just the one that happened to survive long enough to tell its story. What if the oldest pyramid complex in the Americas wasn't built for kings, gods, or even burials, but for something far stranger? Deep in the Peruvian desert lies Caral, a 5,000-year-old city so advanced, so organized, and so out of place in history that some archaeologists still call it an impossible civilization. Caral shouldn't exist, not at this scale, not at this time, and definitely not with the level of engineering it displays. The city rises from the desert like a fossilized memory. 6 massive pyramids, vast circular plazas, observatories, intricate staircases, water channels, and residential zones arranged with mathematical precision. Yet no weapons, no signs of warfare, no fortifications, and no royal tombs have ever been found. It's as if an entire civilization built monumental structures, without the usual human reasons for doing so. But the real mystery begins when you look at the timeline. Caral dates back to 2600 BCE, the same era when the Great Pyramids of Egypt were still being built. Yet the two cultures had no known contact. And while Egypt built tombs for pharaohs, Caral built something entirely different: platforms, ceremonial structures, and knowledge centers aligned with astronomical events. So the question is simple: how did an ancient American civilization suddenly appear, fully formed and architecturally advanced, thousands of years before history says it should have? And then it gets stranger. Inside these structures, researchers found musical instruments, woven quipus, possible early writing or record-keeping, delicate textiles, and sophisticated irrigation systems. They used geometry, surveying, and urban planning with a level of precision that shouldn't have existed in a pre-ceramic society. But some of the most puzzling evidence comes from what they did not have. No pottery, no metal tools, no written language, no armies. And yet, they built pyramids. One of the circular sunken plazas has acoustic properties so perfect that a whisper at one end can be heard clearly across the structure. The layout of Caral aligns with celestial events, suggesting a deep understanding of astronomy. Even more mysterious, several pyramids show signs of being rebuilt and expanded multiple times, as if the builders were responding to something. But to what? Some scholars believe Caral possessed lost engineering knowledge, a kind of early science that disappeared when the civilization collapsed. Others think it may have served as a spiritual or astronomical capital for the entire region, influencing later Andean cultures. But the biggest question is this: where did they get the blueprint? Caral seems to appear suddenly in the archaeological record, with no earlier developmental stages. No smaller cities, no primitive experiments, just a leap straight into monumental architecture. It's as if someone turned a switch on, and then just as suddenly as it flourished, Caral was abandoned. No battle, no fire, no disaster. People simply walked away. The entire city faded into the sands of time, leaving behind pyramids that predate the Inca by thousands of years. Some researchers believe climate change, specifically a mega drought, forced the population to scatter. Others believe a massive earthquake destabilized the region. But there's a more unsettling theory: that Caral's purpose had been fulfilled, and whatever mission or knowledge the builders carried was no longer needed. Today, the pyramids rise silently, older than almost every major structure in the world. Their staircases go nowhere. Their corridors echo with secrets, and their stones hold the blueprint of a civilization far too advanced for its time. So the mystery remains: how did America's first pyramid builders acquire knowledge equal to, or possibly older than, the ancient Egyptians? And what was Caral truly built for? A forgotten metropolis, an astronomical university, a sacred center, or something else entirely? Whatever the truth is, Caral rewrites everything we thought we knew about ancient civilizations, and hints that humanity's deepest history is still buried just beneath the surface, waiting to be uncovered. In the ancient halls of the Temple of Seti Wine in Abydos, Egypt, there is a single panel of hieroglyphs that has ignited debates, theories, and controversies for decades. A panel so strange that people around the world believe it might be proof of lost technology. or even something not of this world. Carved into the stone, high above a ceremonial walkway, are shapes that appear uncannily familiar to the modern eye. A helicopter, a submarine, what looks like a futuristic aircraft, and a hovering, disc-like craft. But here's the mystery. These carvings are estimated to be more than 3,000 years old, created during the reign of Seti, and later continued under his son Ramses II, and yet the shapes resemble machines humans wouldn't invent for thousands of years. So how is that possible? That is where the mystery begins. When the carvings first gained attention in the late 20th century, visitors, researchers, and even pilots who saw photographs immediately recognized the helicopter form. A long body, a tail boom, a cockpit-like shape, and even rotor-like edges. Next to it, another shape seemed to have the profile of a submarine. Another looked like a jet or flying craft. Were the ancient Egyptians carving the technology of the future, or recording something they saw? Or is it something less mysterious but even more fascinating? Egyptologists have tried to explain the anomaly using a concept called palimpsest carving, a method where new hieroglyphs are carved over older ones. Over time, the plaster used to fill the older carvings erodes, creating overlapping shapes that form accidental images. According to scholars, the helicopter is supposedly the merging of two different text layers, one from Seti I and another carved decades later by Ramses II. When the first layer was partially filled, then eroded, and then overlapped by a new layer, the combined shapes formed what looks like modern vehicles. That's one interpretation. But here's where the mystery deepens. Even if the carvings are overlapping layers, the specific shapes they form are astonishingly precise. The helicopter isn't just vaguely similar, it's shockingly accurate. It has structure, proportions, and elements that match a modern military helicopter almost perfectly. And the other shapes, they don't look random either. One resembles a long cylindrical craft with a pointed front, much like a submarine or torpedo-shaped vessel. Another shape appears aerodynamic, almost like a stylized jet or unknown aircraft. It's almost too perfect to dismiss as coincidence. Some researchers argue that if you overlap random hieroglyphs thousands of times, you would rarely, if ever, get something this exact. And yet here it is, carved into one of Egypt's most sacred temples. Others propose that the ancient Egyptians may have been recording mythical sky chariots, symbolic craft, or even visions from altered states used during rituals. But there is also the fringe theory, the one that keeps the mystery alive to this day, that ancient civilizations may have witnessed technology far beyond their own, and carved what they saw the only way they knew how. Whether those visions came from advanced visitors, a forgotten civilization, or something lost to history, no one can say. But the carvings remain silent, precise, and impossible to ignore. What makes the mystery even stronger is the location, the Temple of Seti. It wasn't just any temple, it was a spiritual center dedicated to resurrection, kingship, and the spirit world. Many believe the temple encoded hidden knowledge, sacred information, and symbolic messages meant for future generations. So the question stands, if the overlapping hieroglyph explanation is correct, is it simply one of the greatest coincidences in archaeological history? Or is it a clue, a message, a remnant of something the ancient Egyptians saw or knew? To this day, the helicopter hieroglyphs remain one of the most debated inscriptions in Egyptology. Visitors still stand beneath the stone and stare upward, trying to understand how something so modern appears in a civilization so ancient. Accident, symbol, vision, or forgotten history? Whatever the truth is, the carvings at Abydos remain one of humanity's most compelling archaeological mysteries. A message carved in stone, suspended between the past and the future, still waiting for an answer. There are mysteries that confuse archaeologists, and then there are discoveries that seem almost engineered to challenge logic itself. Deep in the jungles of Costa Rica, scattered across forests, fields, and ancient settlements, lie hundreds of nearly perfect stone spheres. Objects so precise, so mathematically flawless, they have become one of the most impossible ancient artifacts ever uncovered. The story began in the 1930s, when a banana plantation company was clearing land for new fields. Workers stumbled upon huge round stones buried in the ground, smooth, polished, and impossible in their perfection. At first, they pushed them aside with bulldozers, unaware of what they had found. Some cracked, some shattered, but the more they dug, the more they discovered. Soon dozens, then hundreds, emerged from the earth. Some were the size of baseballs. Others were nearly 8 feet tall and weighed up to 16 tons. And every single one shared the same property: perfect geometric roundness, not close to round, not roughly spherical, but mathematically exact, something that even modern machines struggle to achieve with stone. But how were they made? No one knows. Creating a stone sphere this perfect requires grinding, shaping, and polishing with precision tools, measuring angles and curves from every direction. And these ancient creators weren't working with metal, lasers, or machines. They were working with stone. Yet their craftsmanship surpasses nearly everything produced in their era. The mystery deepens when you consider where they were found. Many spheres appear arranged deliberately, aligned in straight lines, clustered in groups, or placed to mark specific points within old settlements. But time and erosion have erased whatever larger design once existed, leaving behind only fragments of a forgotten pattern. Some researchers believe they were astronomical markers. Others suggest boundary stones, status symbols, or even representations of the sun. But none of these theories explain why hundreds were needed, or why they vary so dramatically in size while keeping perfect form. Then comes the strangest question of all: how were they moved? Some spheres were discovered miles from any natural stone source, transported across rivers, up hills, and into dense jungle, without wheels, without draft animals, without documented engineering methods. The people who carved them, known today as the Dikis culture, left almost no written records. Their tools were simple, their villages small, and shortly after the spheres were made, their entire civilization vanished. No wars, no natural disaster, no known cause. They simply disappeared from history, leaving behind the one thing no other culture has replicated: flawless stone spheres scattered like breadcrumbs across the landscape. Even modern archaeologists can't fully recreate these artifacts using the same ancient tools. Attempts to replicate them require precision measuring, constant checking of curvature, and incredibly skilled artisans. Yet someone, thousands of years ago, achieved this level of perfection repeatedly. And then there's the unsettling part. Many spheres were found on artificial mounds arranged in ways that suggest intentional meaning. Some were oriented toward magnetic north, others toward the rising or setting sun. A few were grouped in patterns that hint at star formations. But the truth remains locked away, an entire system of knowledge lost with the people who understood it. Were they ceremonial, scientific, symbolic, or something we haven't yet imagined? Today, the stone spheres of Costa Rica sit in museums, jungles, and private collections across the world. But no matter where they end up, they carry the same unanswered questions. Who carved them? How did they achieve such perfection? What purpose did they serve? And why did an entire culture devote generations to creating objects so flawless and yet leave behind no explanation? In the end, the spheres may be more than artifacts. They may be reminders that ancient civilizations were not primitive, but capable of mastery, mathematics, and engineering that still outpace our expectations. Silent and immovable, they remain one of the greatest ancient puzzles ever found, and a message carved in stone that we still don't know how to read. Deep beneath the sands of Saqqara, one of Egypt's oldest and strangest burial grounds, workers uncovered a tomb unlike anything they had seen. It belonged to a young noble named Sabu, the son of an early dynastic official. His burial wasn't lavish, but it held one object that has haunted archaeologists for nearly a century. It was small, delicate, carved from a single piece of stone. A disc, gray, smooth, almost metallic in shape, with 3 curved flanges extending from the center like the blades of an impossible machine. At first, researchers didn't pay much attention. They cataloged it as a bowl, a plate, or a purely symbolic artifact. But that explanation didn't survive long, because the more experts examined the object, the more impossible it became. The disc is made from schist, a fragile, flaky stone that breaks with the slightest pressure. Yet whoever carved this object shaped it with perfect symmetry, razor-thin edges and curves so precise they look like they were engineered rather than hand-carved. Modern sculptors have tried to replicate it. Most of them failed. Industrial machines can do it, but ancient tools cannot. And that is where the mystery begins. Stone from the first dynasty should be crude, chipped, and uneven. But this object looks aerodynamic, almost like a turbine, a propeller, or a flywheel. Nothing else like it exists in any other Egyptian tomb. and the design doesn't match any known purpose. Some engineers who examined it proposed that the disk looks like part of a complex mechanical system, a rotating component that would need to spin within a housing. But there were no machines like that in 3000 BCE. At least none we acknowledge. Attempts to test the disk's function using 3D models led to even stranger conclusions. When placed in simulation, its curved fins channeled airflow in a way that resembled early concepts of flight. Not modern flight, but gliding, lifting, balancing. The shape is so advanced that aerodynamics experts admitted it shouldn't exist in the ancient world. The question became, why would someone carve such a machine-like shape from a brittle stone? Why was it buried with a young noble? And where did the design come from? Some Egyptologists insist it must have been ceremonial, a symbolic object with no real purpose. But symbolism usually reflects known forms, animals, tools, celestial patterns. It looks nothing like any artistic style or religious motif from the era. Others believe the Sabu Disk was a model, a scale representation of a larger device. If so, the original could not have been made from schist. It would have required wood, metal, or even bronze, materials that leave traces. But none were ever found. A smaller group of researchers proposed something even more unsettling: that ancient Egyptians possessed technological knowledge that vanished long before their recorded history began. Knowledge inherited from an unknown culture, or survivors of a forgotten catastrophe. Then there's the extreme theory, whispered, controversial, and impossible to ignore because of the object's aerodynamic shape. The disk resembles the kind of components found in early aircraft prototypes, or something designed for propulsion. Could it be a representation of a real device the ancient Egyptians once witnessed? Something that didn't belong to their time? A few fringe historians even argue that the disk may link to stories from the pyramid texts, which describe the gods traveling on boats of the sky and wheels that turn in the air. Most dismiss these as mythology, but mythology always begins somewhere. Today, the Sabu Disk sits behind glass in the Egyptian Museum. Small, cracked, unassuming. Tourists walk past it without looking twice, but engineers, sculptors, and historians who understand the implications often stand frozen in front of it, because the disk challenges everything we believe about early Egypt. It defies the tools they supposedly had. It contradicts their known technology. It doesn't fit the timeline. It shouldn't exist, and yet it does. If this is just a symbolic item, then it's a masterpiece of ancient imagination. But if it's a model, a memory, or a leftover design from someone else's knowledge, then the Sabu Disk is more than an artifact. It's evidence, a clue pointing to a chapter of human history we've never uncovered. Hidden, forgotten, erased. Deep in the cold, rugged wilderness of Russia's Ural Mountains lies one of the most puzzling archaeological discoveries ever made. Tiny metallic objects so small, so precise, and so advanced, they shouldn't exist. Not thousands of years ago, not hundreds of years ago, but they do. And to this day, scientists still can't explain who made them, or how. In the early 1990s, a group of geologists were examining sediments near the Kojum, Narada, and Balbanyu rivers. What they expected to find were natural mineral fragments. What they discovered instead left the scientific community stunned. Microscopic metal spirals, coils, and engineered components, buried in layers of earth dating back 20,000 to 100,000 years. These objects weren't stones, they weren't bones. They weren't natural formations, they were manufactured. Under a microscope, the structures showed precision engineering. Perfect spirals, uniform coils, machine shapes, and tiny rods as small as 0.03 millimeters. To put that into perspective, that's smaller than a grain of sand. Some were so small they could only be seen with advanced magnification. But the most shocking detail, they were made of metals that humans were not supposed to be working with at that time. Copper, tungsten, molybdenum. All materials known today for their use in high-tech industries, aerospace engineering, electronics, and industrial machinery. Yet these advanced metals were found deep within layers of earth older than human civilization itself. So who created them? There are three theories, none fully accepted and each more mysterious than the last. Some researchers believe the nanostructures are remnants of a prehistoric civilization whose technology rivaled or surpassed our own. If that civilization existed, it has completely vanished without a trace, except for these microscopic artifacts. The design of the coils suggests deliberate craftsmanship, almost like components of tiny engines, miniature sensors, or micro-mechanical devices. But if such a civilization truly existed, how did it develop high-precision metallurgy tens of thousands of years before recorded history? And what happened to it? No ruins, no structures, no records. Just the impossible fragments buried beneath the mountains. Another theory suggests the nanostructures were once part of larger machines. Machines designed to withstand intense heat or industrial processes. Tungsten and molybdenum are not common. They are used where high temperature and durability are required. So why would these metals be used tens of thousands of years ago? Could ancient humans have stumbled upon natural machinery left behind by something or someone? Or could the Ural Mountains have once hosted activity far beyond what we imagine? After news of the discovery spread, the Russian Academy of Sciences conducted multiple analyses. Their conclusion? The objects appear artificial, but their origin is unknown. Some dismissed the findings as contamination. Others insisted the dating measurements were wrong. But those who studied the artifacts firsthand rejected those explanations. The sediment layers were intact, untouched, and ancient. The truth? Nobody has an answer. Shortly after the discovery, the research team lost access to the site due to military restrictions in the region. Many of the artifacts disappeared and further studies became impossible. It's as if someone or something didn't want the investigation to continue. Today, the ancient nanostructures of the Urals remain one of the most perplexing anomalies on Earth. They defy timelines, defy logic, and defy the story we believe about human technological development. Were they remnants of a forgotten civilization? Evidence of unknown ancient machines? Or traces of visitors from beyond our world? No one can say. All we know is this. Deep in the mountains of Russia, microscopic metallic spirals lie buried in the ancient Earth. A silent message from the past. A blueprint of impossible technology, and a mystery that rewrites history, whether we're ready for it or not.
Some mysteries don't begin with discovery, they begin with disbelief. When archaeologists first scraped away the soil on a barren hill in southeastern Turkey, they didn't expect anything remarkable. The land looked ordinary, almost dull, just rocks, dust, and scattered animal bones. But buried beneath this hill was something that made history itself feel upside down, something so old, so advanced, and so impossible that for many years, experts refused to accept what they were seeing. Göbekli Tepe, a place that shouldn't exist. At first, the site looked like a pile of broken limestone pieces. Farmers had plowed around it for years. Shepherds had grazed animals across the hilltop. No one knew that under their feet lay massive T-shaped pillars weighing up to 20 tons each, arranged in perfect circles, built before the invention of writing, pottery, metal tools, or even settled villages. These stones were older than the pyramids, older than Stonehenge, older than any known temple on Earth, and inside them was carved a story that still defies explanation. When excavation began, the first thing researchers noticed was the precision. Giant pillars stood arranged like ancient observatories. Some were decorated with carved reliefs: snakes, foxes, vultures, scorpions, lions. Not random animals, but species arranged with meaning, as if the stones were pages of a massive stone book. Some pillars had arms carved along their sides, hands clasped at the front, almost human in posture. It was as if the builders wanted the stones themselves to stand as guardians. But the strangest thing wasn't the carvings, it was the age. Radiocarbon testing revealed Göbekli Tepe was built around 9600 BC. That's 6,000 years before the pyramids. That's before the wheel, before agriculture, before cities. According to everything historians believed, humans of that time were simple hunter-gatherers, small bands of nomadic people with no architecture, no organized religion, no engineering skills. They weren't supposed to build anything more complex than huts or tents. Yet here stood the world's first known monumental structure, a temple built with engineering that, by all logic, shouldn't have existed. How did they move stones weighing more than a bus? How did they carve them with such detail? How did they organize hundreds of people to perform a building project that would require planning, leadership, and complex knowledge? And the biggest question of all, why? Göbekli Tepe wasn't a city. No houses, no hearths, no signs of daily life were found. It wasn't a burial ground, it wasn't a fortress. It looked like a place humans traveled to, not to live, but to gather, worship, or perform rituals. Some researchers now believe the site rewrites human history. Maybe it wasn't agriculture that created organized religion. Maybe it was the other way around. Maybe people built Göbekli Tepe first, and then invented farming so they could stay near it. A society shaped by a temple, not a temple shaped by society, but the mystery deepens. After thousands of years of use, someone intentionally buried the entire complex under tons of soil. Not destroyed, buried. Carefully, deliberately. As if they wanted to hide it, protect it, preserve it, or seal something away. Why would a civilization spend centuries building a sacred site, only to cover it up? Some theories suggest climate change forced the builders to abandon the place. Others believe shifts in belief systems made the temple obsolete. A few think the burial was ceremonial, a final act of respect. And then there are the fringe theories. Some claim the carvings mark ancient astronomical events, even a comet impact that changed global climate around 10,900 BC. Others think the figures represent constellations, encoded knowledge, or even warnings from a forgotten civilization. Göbekli Tepe is a puzzle with no edge pieces. Every time archaeologists uncover a new circle of pillars, another question appears. And here's the most haunting detail. Only 5% of the entire site has been excavated. The rest remains buried, untouched, holding secrets older than every written culture on Earth. What else lies beneath the soil? More pillars? More carvings? Evidence of something we're not prepared to understand. Göbekli Tepe forces us to consider a possibility historians have avoided for decades, that humans were far more advanced, far earlier than we ever imagined. That ancient knowledge might have risen, thrived, and then vanished long before our textbooks begin. A civilization lost, a temple forgotten, a history erased by time, but not completely. Because on a lonely hill in Turkey, the stones still stand, silent, watching, waiting for us to uncover what they've been guarding for more than 10,000 years.
In the end, when you look at all these discoveries together, the impossible carvings, the precision engineering, the artifacts that don't fit the timeline, the symbols no one can decode, and the structures we still can't explain, you start to realize something unsettling. These aren't isolated mysteries. They're pieces of a much larger puzzle. A puzzle that stretches across continents, cultures, and thousands of years, yet somehow carries the same echoes, the same patterns, the same impossible brilliance. Every discovery on this list forces us to confront one question: how much of human history do we actually know? Because the deeper we dig, the more we find things that shouldn't exist, but do. Things that challenge our textbooks, rewrite our assumptions, and whisper that entire chapters of our past may be missing, erased, forgotten, or never recorded at all. Maybe ancient civilizations were far more advanced than we ever imagined. Maybe knowledge rose and fell long before our current timeline began. Or maybe someone else walked these lands before us. But one thing is certain: these mysteries are not finished. They're waiting for the next discovery, the next connection, the next piece of truth that brings everything together. And until that day comes, all we can do is explore, question, and wonder, because the past is far stranger and far more incredible than we ever believed. If you want more deep mysteries like this, let me know in the comments. And don't forget to like and subscribe so you never miss what we uncover next.